Greetings and welcome to yarnspirations.com. I'm Mary Beth Temple from Hooked for Life, and in this video we're going to go over some tips and tricks for knitted Intarsia. Now, Intarsia is a type of color work in which we use a different strand of yarn for different blocks of color. So in this particular chart, now this is the Tropical Leaf Knit Pillow, which is a free pattern available here on yarnspirations.com. But I'm just going to work on this little section of it. I'm not going to cast on the whole pillow so that we can just look at a small sample of Intarsia. So what I'm planning is to use one strand of yarn on the right-hand side of the work in the light color, and then I will use one strand of the dark color, and then I'm going to use a second strand on the left-hand side of the work. And the reason I'm going to do that is I don't want the yarn, if I'm knitting across this row, I don't want to have that many stitches with unused yarn behind them. I don't want to carry the yarn from here to here. So the yarn that we carry behind the color that we're using, so it's the unused color, but we're carrying it behind the color that we are using, and that's called a float. And generally speaking, you do not want a float to be more than 4, possibly 5 stitches, but I like to keep it to 3 or 4. So again, I'm just knitting this little section. I outlined it in red so I could see what I was doing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to knit 11 in my light color. Now this is a right side row, so I'm reading the color chart from right to left. I know that I have done a lot of videos on lace charts, talking about how you read from right to left and then from left to right on alternate rows, and working on color charts is the same thing. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now looking at my chart, I have 1, 2, 3 of the green. So I'm just attaching the green for the first time because I just started this swatch. So all I'm going to do is pull up a fold of the yarn, maybe 6 to 8 inches, which is what, 15, 20 centimeters in from the end, and I'm going to weave that in later. So I'm just going to leave it hang. I'm not going to make a knot or anything horrible like that. So I'm just going to let the tail hang down, and so I'm going to knit 3 in the green, 1, 2, 3. Now I could, if I wanted to, float, because that's only 3 stitches, but since I see this large section of dark green coming up here, and I know I don't want to float that far, I'm going to start my bobbin right now. So this is what we call a butterfly bobbin, and all you have to do that is to wind the yarn in a figure 8 pattern between your fingers, and then you use the far tail, just wrap it around to keep it even. And what that's going to do is, as I'm knitting along, I can pull it out and it will give me yarn to work on as I'm knitting. You can also use a plastic bobbin that you might get at the store, or an index card. I know a designer that uses bread ties, just something to get that yarn on so that you do not have many, many giant balls of yarn hanging off the back of your work. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and of course that's all the rest of my stitches. So once again, pulling up a fold 6 to 8 inches from the end, and I'm going to just knit across using my bobbin. So now when I'm coming back in the other direction, when I'm working on my wrong side row, I'm going to read the chart in that direction. So I'm up here, I'm going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the white. Let me double count that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the dark green. And then I'm going to knit to the end in the white using the other side. So let me do my purl 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I'm going to purl my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in the green. So now my green yarn is over here, and I need it over here, but that float is less than 5. That's only 3 stitches, so I'm going to go ahead and float that over. Now, you hear a lot of talk in Intarsia knitting about gaps and how to avoid gaps. And sometimes instructions will say you have to twist it, and I don't find that to be very specific. So what I want you to think about when you're doing this kind of color work is always twisting your yarn in the same fashion every time. It will avoid gaps. So every time you come to a color change, I want you to think, bring the new color under the old color. New under old, new under old, new under old. And if you do that consistently throughout, and you watch your stitches so that you neither pull them too tight nor leave them too loose, then you won't have those holes. So the new color, in this case, is the green under the old color, which is the white. And I'm also going to make sure that it's under the color that I'm done with. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now again, there's a big gap here, but that's because these are tails. These are not, I've got the tail right there. So there's no twisting happening yet. And I'm going to close up that gap when I weave my ends in at the very end. So now I'm switching back to the white. So I want the new color, which is the white, to be under the old color, which is the green. So new under old, new under old, new under old. And if you keep twisting consistently. Now, if I was doing this whole piece and say I had a lot of bobbins, I actually knit a plaid piece one time that had 22 bobbins across it. It was a really interesting plaid, but oh my goodness, those bobbins. That was a lot of bobbins. You may, every couple of rows, have to stop and untangle them, make sure that they are not getting in the way of each other, because that can be really frustrating. So let's go ahead and take a look at one more row. Let's try this one. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the white, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of the green, and then knit in the white to the end. So 1, 2, and of course we always want to keep the twists on the same side of the work, which is the wrong side of the work. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I'm looking at the back. I want my new color under the old, new under old, new under old, always, 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 to keep those holes from happening. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And I'm going to go back to the light color. Again, sorry, let me just pull up some yarn so I don't make a mess. New under old. The new color is the white, the light color. So I'm making sure that that is under the old color that I just dropped. 1. Now, when you first start doing this, I highly recommend, if you've never done it before, that you try a little practice swatch, because you will find that your gauge or your tension, you'll find a rhythm to it after a while. When you first get started, you get a little anxious. You don't want to pull too hard. You don't want to pull too loose. So again, the only reason I have my little hole there is because I have to weave in that green. But if you look where the other color changes are, there are no gaps. All right, so going back, I'm going to read in this direction. So that's what I'm going to do moving forward. I'm going to work back and forth in rows. I'm going to make sure that I am reading the chart in the direction that I need to be reading it in. And on a big chart like this, maybe I'm knitting across the row that I just did, and instead of trying to count all those stitches out, I don't want to count those numbers. I can look at the green stitches I already have and know that I'm going to start one sooner and go two more. So really, color work is very intuitive. You can do it however you like. You can count all the numbers out, or you can say I'm going to knit until one before the green stitch, and I'm going to make that a green stitch, and I'm going to go until two past the other green stitches. So you will find a rhythm when you keep going, and it really is not as difficult as it seems. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, and I know that they recommended it in this pattern, is the light colors here. I'm not going to use a bobbin for that. I'm going to go ahead and put that in duplicate stitch, which one works with a tapestry needle. So you don't necessarily have to have a bobbin for every color of every time, particularly on stitches like this where there's only one happening at once. There's only one stitch here or one stitch there. You've only got a couple in a row or one or two in a chunk. I'm not going to float all of that because it will make the work thick. So those are some tips on knitting Intarsia. I hope you give it a shot either in this project, which is the Tropical Leaf Knit Pillow, or in some other colorwork projects that you might have had your eye on here on yarnspirations.com. I'm Mary Beth Temple from Hooked for Life. Thanks for joining us.